We have breaking news tonight. Democrat Don Siegelman, the former governor of Alabama, is a free man tonight. I just spoke to him from his car on his way back home from prison, where he's been locked up since last summer, serving a 7-year sentence on corruption charges. Charges that Siegelman's supporters have long claimed were politically motivated by prominent Alabama Republicans. A former Republican operative even claimed that former presidential advisor Karl Rove was behind the effort to bring down Siegelman as the popular Democrat campaigned for another term. Today, Siegelman spoke briefly as he walked out of prison in Louisiana.
I may have lost my freedom for a while, but I never lost faith. But now, and I'm sure you understand this, I want to be with my family for a few days.
He is now probably about 20 minutes away from his home. For weeks, we called for the court to release Siegelman. While he appeals, the trial court said no. But in a stunning ruling from the appellate court yesterday, they agreed with us and found that Siegelman's appeal, quote, raises substantial questions of law or fact, and ruled that, quote, Siegelman shall be released. Tonight, Siegelman told me that he is convinced the case was politically motivated and believes Karl Rove was behind it. He said he, quote, never thought there was any chance he would be convicted. He also told me that this demonstrates the problems go, quote, much deeper in this Justice Department. Here with me now, Democratic Congressman Artur of Alabama, who's calling on Karl Rove to come forward as part of a congressional investigation into possible political prosecutions, and Scott Horton, lecturer at Columbia Law School, has written extensively about this case for Harper's. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming on. Congressman, I was amazed in my conversation with Governor Siegelman, only hours after leaving prison, how quickly he brought up Karl Rove. What are you doing in this regard to try and get to the bottom of what involvement, if any, Karl Rove may have had?
Dan, he's right to bring up Karl Rove because Karl Rove is really the central character in this unsolved mystery. There have been allegations made, very specific allegations, that Karl Rove went to the Department of Justice and instigated them to push this case. And let me put this in some perspective. Whenever a former governor, current governor, member of Congress is under investigation, that is handled by the highest levels of the Department of Justice. Even if the case is tried by local U.S. attorneys, the ultimate decision to prosecute is brought by people sitting in Washington, the chief of the criminal division, chief of the Office of Public Integrity. So the allegation that Rove influenced those individuals is very important. And what I hope Congress will do, what I hope the Judiciary Committee will do, is to put a subpoena in Karl Rove's hand and to pull him before Congress. He has no cloak of executive privilege here because no one's asking him about what he talked about, president or vice president. We want to ask him what he talked about with the Department of Justice.
Scott Horton,
he has no executive privilege.
Hang on a second, Congressman. Scott Horton, this is a bigger issue with Karl Rove. I mean, you've got this U.S. attorney scandal where they're having problems getting people in to testify about that. And there the question also was, what role did Karl Rove play? But tonight, you have a former governor of the state of Alabama right now about 20 minutes away from his home after an almost 9-hour drive back from a federal prison where he's been sitting for 7 months. And the question is, did Karl Rove have any hand in this? Let's be clear. You're a lecturer at Columbia Law School. Karl Rove is not supposed to have anything to do with the Justice Department, right?
Absolutely. In fact, if he became involved in the prosecution, it would be corrupt influence, and that would be a crime. But in this case, I think the governor said his fingerprints were all over it. That's also what I found when I looked at it. Every time I overturned a stone, I found Karl Rove. In fact, we go back and look at how this prosecution began. It started with the state attorney general, William Pryor, and Pryor has a political advisor and campaign advisor. His name is Karl Rove in the background. Then we had U.S. Attorney Laura Canary. Her husband, William Canary, close business associate of Karl Rove. And we've got Karl Rove in the background advising the Republican governor of Alabama, who, of course, was Governor Siegelman's adversary.
Yeah. All right. Let me play a piece of sound. This is from Siegelman himself in 2004. And I got to tell you, when we went back and I heard this comment from him, it was very similar to what he told me tonight. He was at this point talking about having just met George W. Bush at a national governors convention and saying effectively that he wasn't very impressed with him, and he thinks that was the beginning of the end.
I left there with the impression that while this guy was very personable, he was not exceedingly bright. And I was the first governor to desert my colleagues and openly oppose George Bush's run for presidency and to support Al Gore. I gained the disfavor of Karl Rove, who was also Alabama's Attorney General's political consultant.
See, Congressman, what struck me most was the fact that you had these 52 state attorneys general, Democrats and Republicans, former attorneys general from all over the country, who were writing a letter to you and to Congress saying, please investigate this. And they said there's reason to believe that the case may have had sufficient irregularities as to call into question the basic fairness that is the linchpin of our system of justice. I mean, it's what got me to say, wow. If you've got 52 state attorneys general, Republicans and Democrats saying that, there's got to be, at least something to look at here. So exactly, let's be clear, exactly what can Congress do at this point to get to the bottom of this?
Well, what Congress can do is to subpoena Karl Rove, and what Congress can continue to do is to dig into the facts around this case. And let's understand why 52 attorney generals signed this letter. This was an unusually weak case, and it's impossible to talk about this without making that point to your audience. The reason that everyone thinks that there's something to these allegations, or so many people think that, is because it was an unusually weak case. The case against Siegelman rested on two witnesses, both of whom admitted to committing crimes, both of whom told multiple inconsistent stories to the government. The major witness told 3 different stories. In my old days of practice in law, I learned if someone tells 3 different stories, at least 2 are probably false, and probably all 3 of them.
And also,
so it's an unusually weak case.
And Scott,
normally
also,
cases aren't broad of that nature.
What really troubled me was that one of the key witnesses had made complaints about Republicans, key Republicans, that presumably were never investigated, and they only investigated Siegelman.
That's exactly right, Lanny Young. I mean, he really, the major complaints he raised went to Jeff Sessions, Alabama Republican senator, and also to Pryor. Now, Pryor, as I noted, initiated this investigation and was co-prosecuting it. He was the subject of the allegations. Those allegations were not examined.
Bottom line, 2 Republicans, two very prominent Republicans, federal judge, senator, and there was no investigation in that regard. All right, let me play this sound. This is from Karl Rove. This came after there was an allegation against Rove from this Republican operative who said that Rove actually asked her to get sort of compromising photos of Governor Siegelman. Now remember, she's a Republican, and here is what Rove's response was.
I did not ask her or anyone to dig up dirty photographs on the governor. I've never worked with her. I don't believe I've ever met her. I may have shaken her hand at a fundraiser, but she has never been working in a campaign in Alabama I worked in, and I never asked her to do a darn thing.
And I should say, Scott, that the Lewis Franklin, the senior acting U.S. attorney in the Middle District of Alabama, said Karl Rove had no role whatsoever in bringing about the investigation or prosecution of former Governor Don Siegelman. I mean, look, I have a lot of faith in our U.S. attorneys around this country, and they don't all just sort of fall into party line with whatever the Justice Department wants them to do. So is it possible that Franklin didn't know what the source was? I mean, what's your explanation for that?
It's absolutely impossible for Lewis Franklin to know what he's stating here. This investigation began early on with William Pryor, a man who was being closely advised and coached by Karl Rove throughout this period. Lewis Franklin has no idea what was going on there. He also has no idea what was going on with Laura Canary, his boss, someone who had a social relationship with Karl Rove.
We're gonna stay on this story. Thank you, Congressman. Congressman, we'd love to see you back. Let us know what you're doing on this. We know you're going to keep investigating. Scott Horton, as always, we appreciate it. One final note: Governor Siegelman had agreed to come on the program tonight. I know he wanted to. Unfortunately, there's a PR team who's now calling the shots. They're out trying to cut deals with the media for access. Most importantly, we certainly hope to have the governor on in the future.